In March this year, a Chinese company won a 50-year right to mine bauxite in Guinea-Bissau. And honestly, the world reacted like someone just opened a treasure chest in a locked room. Headlines screamed about a possible debt trap. Opinion pieces warned of loss of sovereignty. Others called it a lifeline. Which is closer to the truth? So, let's start simple. Imagine a tiny country with rich soil full of valuable rocks. But people still struggle to buy food. Now imagine a giant country showing up with money, roads, machines, and a single offer. Take our help, and let us develop the mines for the next 50 years. For some, that sounds like a rescue. For others, it smells like a bargain where the small party gets the short end. Why this moment matters? Bauxite isn't just dirt. It's the raw stuff used to make aluminum, the metal in planes, cars, and satellites. Whoever controls the supply has power over industries and prices. A 50-year contract handed to a foreign company is not a small choice. It's a long game. What you'll get in this video, we'll unpack who Guinea-Bissau is, why it handed over those rights, what bauxite actually does, what China brings to the table, and why Western commentators are worried. We'll look at the numbers, the people on the ground, and the big picture politics, and try to answer, is this a helpful partnership or a risky dependency? To understand why this matters, we first need to meet the country at the center of the story. Guinea-Bissau might not be a name you hear often in the news, but this small West African nation holds a story far bigger than its size. Sitting just south of the Gambia, it covers around 36,000 square kilometers. That's smaller than the U.S. state of Maryland, and is home to just about 2.1 million people. It's a place of warm coastal air, cashew trees, and long, slow rivers that flow into the Atlantic. But behind that calm surface lies a history of struggle and untapped potential. For centuries, Guinea-Bissau was under Portuguese colonial rule, and it didn't win independence until 1974, after a long and painful liberation war. The capital, Bissau, gave the country its full name to distinguish it from its southern neighbor, Guinea. Yet even after freedom, the country faced decades of instability, from political coups to economic hardship, leaving it among the least developed nations in the world, according to the United Nations. But here's the twist. Beneath that fragile economy lies enormous natural wealth. Guinea-Bissau's soil is packed with valuable minerals, gold, diamonds, and especially bauxite, the key ingredient used to make aluminum. Some deposits are so large that experts estimate billions of tons lie untouched underground. Many of these are open-pit mines, which means the minerals are near the surface, cheaper to extract, and of surprisingly high quality. On paper, this sounds like the recipe for prosperity. Yet despite all this, Guinea-Bissau's people remain among the poorest in the world. The average person earns about $2 a day, and much of the population still depends on basic farming to survive. So the question becomes clear. How can a land so rich in minerals remain so poor in opportunity? To understand that paradox, we need to look at what's been holding this country back, and why, even with wealth beneath its feet, Guinea-Bissau hasn't yet found a path to real development. It sounds unbelievable, but Guinea-Bissau's situation is a classic example of what experts call the resource curse. This is when a country is rich in natural resources but still trapped in poverty, and Guinea-Bissau fits that picture perfectly. Let's look at the numbers. In 2022, the country's entire economy, its GDP, was only about 1.7 billion US dollars. To put that in perspective, that's less than what some big companies make in a single day. The average person lives on just $2 a day, and almost 80% of the population depends on agriculture. Yet most farmers still use traditional tools and methods that haven't changed much in decades. With little access to modern machines or fertilizers, crop yields stay low. The government has tried to improve things by promoting cash crops like cashew nuts, which are now Guinea-Bissau's main export. But there's a catch. The country doesn't have the factories to process cashews or other products. So instead of selling finished goods, they export raw materials, earning far less money. It's like selling unbaked dough instead of bread. Worse still, this focus on export crops reduced rice farming, even though rice is a local staple food. Rice yields dropped so much that the country now imports more than 600,000 tons every year just to feed its people. Imagine living in a fertile land but still having to buy food from abroad. It's a painful irony. Then there's the darker side of the economy, drug trafficking. Because Guinea-Bissau's coastline sits perfectly between Latin America and Europe, it's become a key transit point for cocaine smuggling. According to UN reports, up to 70% of government officials have been linked to money laundering connected to the drug trade. Shocking, right? This illegal industry makes up more than 20% of the country's GDP, corrupting politics and making it even harder to build a stable future. Add to that the scars from the 1998 Civil War, which destroyed much of the nation's infrastructure and set back its development for decades. Even now, electricity shortages, poor roads, and weak institutions make it hard for businesses to grow. All this explains why, despite the mineral riches underground, Guinea-Bissau struggles to move forward. The country simply doesn't have the capital, technology, or expertise to extract and manage its resources effectively. It's like owning a gold mine, but lacking the tools to dig. That's why, when the world turned away, China stepped in, offering not just investment, but a partnership. So how did China become one of Guinea-Bissau's closest allies? Let's dive into that next. China's recent mining deal with Guinea-Bissau didn't just appear out of nowhere. In fact, the relationship between the two countries goes way back to 1974, the very year Guinea-Bissau gained independence. While many Western countries kept their distance, China extended a hand, one that's grown stronger over the decades. Things really picked up after 2013, when China launched the Belt and Road Initiative, a global plan to build trade routes, ports, and infrastructure linking Asia, Africa, and Europe. Guinea-Bissau, like many African nations, saw an opportunity. It needed help rebuilding roads, growing food, and training its people, and China was ready to help with all three. One of China's biggest contributions came in agriculture. Decades ago, Guinea-Bissau could barely grow enough rice to feed itself. So, Chinese experts traveled there, not just to hand out aid, but to teach modern farming. They brought new rice varieties, tractors, fertilizers, and irrigation tools. Over time, they trained more than 100,000 local farmers on how to boost productivity. The results were impressive. Rice yields jumped from just 1.4 tons per hectare to nearly 5 tons, and in demonstration fields, they reached up to 10 tons. A country that once depended on imported rice is now almost self-sufficient, even exporting to neighboring nations. That's a massive turnaround, and it didn't come from speeches or loans. It came from hands-on cooperation. But China didn't stop there. Seeing that Guinea-Bissau's roads were old and broken, Chinese engineers helped build key highways, including the 8.2-kilometer West African Coastal Road, which finished construction in 2024. This new route connected villages and markets that had long been isolated, making it easier for farmers to sell their goods and for trade to flow. So by the time the bauxite deal arrived in 2025, Guinea-Bissau already viewed China not as a newcomer, but as a trusted partner. The groundwork had been laid, literally and diplomatically. From agriculture to infrastructure, China had earned credibility through action. That's why, when discussions about mining began, Guinea-Bissau's government saw it as a continuation of progress, not a risk. But to really understand why this deal is so important, we need to talk about what's being mined and why bauxite is such a big deal for China. So, what exactly is bauxite, and why is China so interested in it? On the surface, it just looks like reddish soil or clay. But inside that dull rock lies aluminum, one of the most valuable and versatile metals in the modern world. Think about it. Aluminum is everywhere. It's in airplanes, skyscrapers, smartphones, cars, trains, and even satellites. Its strength, lightweight, and ability to resist corrosion make it essential for modern technology. Without aluminum, the aerospace and automotive industries would grind to a halt. And to make aluminum, you first need bauxite, the ore from which aluminum is extracted. Here's why this deal matters so much to China. Although China is the world's largest producer of aluminum, it doesn't have enough high-quality bauxite of its own. Most of China's domestic bauxite deposits are low in grade and expensive to mine, with production costs now over $100 per ton. Over the years, China's reserves have been shrinking because of heavy use. In fact, the country holds less than 3% of the world's total bauxite reserves. To keep its aluminum industry running, China relies heavily on imports, and that dependence comes with risks. By 2024, China imported around 159 million tons of bauxite, and roughly a quarter of it came from Australia. That's a big problem, because Australia has often used its supply advantage as political leverage, especially as tensions between Beijing and Canberra rise. Now, imagine being the world's biggest aluminum producer, but depending on your rivals for your raw material. That's like running a bakery but relying on your competitors to sell you flour, not a good position to be in. That's why China is looking to West Africa, a region rich in high-grade bauxite with fewer political complications. Guinea-Bissau's neighbor, already supplies a large portion of China's imports. The ore there is particularly valuable. It contains over 45% alumina, far higher than the global average. And now, with Guinea-Bissau's recent deal, China is expanding that strategy even further. If fully developed, the bauxite mines in Guinea-Bissau's Oyo and Gabu regions could provide millions of tons of ore each year, potentially reducing China's reliance on Australia and giving it more control over global supply chains. For China, this isn't just a business deal. It's a strategic move to secure the raw materials needed for its industries, defense, and space programs. But it's not just about what China gains. It's also about what Guinea-Bissau could build from it. So, what will this deal mean on the ground for the people who live there? Let's take a closer look. For decades, Guinea-Bissau has been one of Africa's smallest and least developed economies. Its population, just over 2 million, has relied heavily on farming, especially cashew nuts, which make up more than 80% of the country's export earnings. But that dependence also made the nation vulnerable. If global prices fell or if crops failed, the economy suffered immediately. That's why this new bauxite deal with China could be a total game changer. It's not just another trade agreement, it's a doorway to industrialization. Under the deal, China isn't only extracting minerals, it's also helping Guinea-Bissau build the foundation for a modern mining economy. This includes new roads, railway lines, and possibly even a deep water port to export the ore more efficiently. All these projects mean one thing: jobs, and lots of them. Government estimates suggest that the bauxite project could create over 10,000 direct and indirect jobs across mining, transport, logistics, and construction. That's a huge number for a small country like Guinea-Bissau. These jobs don't just put money in people's pockets. They also build skills, from heavy machinery operation to engineering and project management. Beyond employment, the deal could generate hundreds of millions of dollars in annual revenue through taxes, royalties, and export duties. If managed well, this money could fund schools, hospitals, electricity, and water systems that many communities have lacked for decades. But China's involvement isn't limited to mining. As part of the broader cooperation, there's growing talk of value addition, meaning that Guinea-Bissau could process its bauxite locally instead of just exporting raw ore. Setting up alumina refineries within the country would multiply its earnings, create even more jobs, and reduce the classic resource curse trap that keeps many African nations poor despite being rich in minerals. And let's not forget the infrastructure effect. Once China builds the mining railways and highways, they won't just serve the mines. They'll connect towns, markets, and farms, unlocking the country's economic potential. Farmers will be able to move their goods faster, traders will access new buyers, and tourism could grow as mobility improves. For Guinea-Bissau, this is a rare opportunity to transform from a forgotten agricultural nation into a regional industrial hub. But that transformation will depend on one crucial thing: how the country handles the challenges that come with big foreign investments. Because while the rewards look promising, the risks are just as real. And that's where the next part of the story begins. Every big opportunity comes with a shadow. And Guinea-Bissau's deal with China is no exception. While it promises new roads, jobs, and revenue, there are also serious concerns about debt, environmental damage, and long-term sovereignty. Let's start with the debt question. Many African nations that partner with China have faced criticism over what some call debt trap diplomacy. The idea is that when countries can't repay Chinese loans, they might have to give up control over key assets, like ports, railways, or natural resources. Examples like Sri Lanka's Hambantota port, which was leased to China for 99 years after the country failed to repay its loan, make people nervous. Guinea-Bissau's economy is small and fragile, so if borrowing isn't carefully managed, it could quickly become dependent on Beijing financially. Then there's the environmental issue. Mining bauxite often means clearing forests, removing topsoil, and contaminating rivers with red mud, a toxic byproduct of aluminum refining. For a country that depends heavily on agriculture and fishing, that kind of pollution could harm local livelihoods. Villages near mining sites risk losing farmland, and fishermen worry about water contamination affecting their catches. Some activists also fear a social divide, where most of the mining wealth benefits politicians and foreign investors instead of ordinary citizens. This has happened before in other African nations, where resource deals enriched a few while leaving the rest behind. Without transparency and accountability, Guinea-Bissau could fall into the same trap. Another challenge lies in dependency. If the economy leans too heavily on bauxite, it might repeat the same mistake it made with cashew nuts, relying on a single commodity for survival. And if global aluminum prices drop, Guinea-Bissau could once again face an economic crisis. However, not everyone sees it as a looming disaster. Many analysts argue that the risk depends on management, not on China itself. If Guinea-Bissau negotiates fair terms, invests mining revenue in development, and enforces environmental rules, the country could avoid the pitfalls that others faced. After all, even critics admit one thing. China delivers projects quickly. Roads get built, ports get opened, and electricity flows. The real test is whether Guinea-Bissau's leaders can make sure these benefits reach their people, not just their pockets. So, the question becomes, can this deal truly lift Guinea-Bissau into a new era, or will it repeat Africa's painful history of resource exploitation? To find the answer, we need to look at how this fits into China's larger strategy across Africa, and what it reveals about Beijing's long-term plans for the continent.